am Christy, your host of Giving Tree Surrogacy's podcast From Bump to Bond, and today I am joined by our Director of Egg Donation, Elena Schaefer. Thank you so much for joining, and we're going to talk through the process of becoming an egg donor with Giving Tree Surrogacy. So welcome, Elena. Can you start with how you ended up here in this field, in this industry? What brought you here? What's your backstory?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have kind of a strange backstory. I know everybody wants to get into this field and it's so hard to get into. I went to school for criminal justice. I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. And I wanted my whole life to be a child protective investigator, which is super strange. Nobody ever wants to do that, but that's what I wanted to do. And I did it. I mean, I graduated college, went straight into investigations, and realized very quickly I hated it. It was just not for me. I'm an empath. I'm too emotional to do all of that. So I basically applied to everything I fit the bill for on Indeed. And I got a call from a surrogacy agency and they wanted to interview me. And I really quickly had to figure out what all of that meant.
Yeah.
I knew the egg donor portion, but not necessarily the surrogate portion. So it was very difficult to get into, but I somehow convinced that agency to hire me. And it was the best thing that's ever happened to me.
That's such an interesting background. And I know we recently had Caroline on, and she has experience in CPS and in working with Child Protective Services. And I think it just kind of draws in, like you said, people that really care and feel like they want to make a difference, and they're finding their way in work and how they apply those kinds of feelings that they have. But that's such an interesting connection that you have that background, and I can certainly understand why you wanted to help families, and that is a very different direction of what egg donation and surrogacy is, but at the same time connected in a way of you're helping families, but helping create families instead of potentially separating them and dealing with a lot of difficult situations. So, wow, that's really cool, though.
It was a good time, and now it brought me here, so I can't complain.
Yeah. So when we can kind of get started on the process of becoming an egg donor, what would you say are the biggest questions that women have as they get started, and maybe even before they apply in that very early stage? Kind of what is the first step that they take? And do you experience times where women are just not sure if they should apply, or do they apply and then they have a lot of questions, both?
Yeah, so most of the time I get an application, and so I would then review the application, reach out to the prospective donor, and it comes with a lot of questions because egg donation is such a niche thing that not a lot of people either know how to research, because you have to research very specific things, or they just, they see something on the internet where it's like, oh, freeze your eggs and then donate them. But, what we do here is very different. It's all fresh donations. So yeah, lots of questions usually come after the application process when we sit down and do a face-to-face meeting, kind of like what we're doing now, and just go over everything. I mean, it is a expedited process, as a lot of people would like to think, but there is so much that goes into it. A lot of the questions revolve around, do I get to know the intended parents? Do I have to travel? What do the injections look like? What's the recovery period look like? So we go into all of that. In that application process.
What are the basic requirements that an egg donor would need to have?
So we all follow the ASRM standard, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine standard, and that upholds age requirements from 21 to 30. So typically, I know we say 30. The matching process is not super quick. So I usually say 29 and a half, just so we're not putting somebody on that's, going to be 30 in 3 days and there's no time to match. So 21 to 30, just so you understand what you're doing. I mean, some people, before this was done, it was 18. You could do a lot of things at 18, but I really like the 21 requirement. People are more, emotionally mature. And apart from that, there's, excuse me, a medical screening process. So your BMI has to be between 18 or between 19 and 28, I believe.
Okay.
Um, you need to not be a smoker. Drinking, you should not drink or be a very limited drinker, maybe even less than casual. You'd have to know your detailed family history, which is very important. So, not that, if somebody is adopted, they can't be an egg donor. That's not what we're saying. But
Hmm.
it's very important to know those things because not everything will show up in the genetic testing.
So family history, and then there are medical criteria that they need to meet to be a donor, BMI and age. What other qualities make someone a great donor beyond the medical criteria?
I think what makes somebody a good donor is just the willingness to want to help somebody. That's the
Hmm.
most important thing. We're not here to do it for the money. Yes, compensation is great, but compensation is to support that want. You need to want to do it. You need to have that. I call it the save the world gene. You need to have the save the world gene to to
Right.
want to get into something like this. You need to be emotionally mature enough to realize that hey, you are doing this, and you are going to give somebody the opportunity to bring a child into this world that is genetically related to you.
Hmm.
And some people are like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It could be, though. Like, you could wake up in 10 years and say, oh my God, I wonder where this child is. And that's quite frankly none of your business. It's just something that's like, you're doing this for them, and you have to be okay with the stepping away portion of it, which I make sure every donor that I interview and accept into the program is.
Hmm.
We also do a psych consult, so we make sure that they're understanding those repercussions of what you're doing.
Yeah, that was my next question was what type of psychological screening is involved, to make sure that women are in the right place um, to be able to separate that and know that this is a donation, and that there won't be lasting effects of
Sure.
like feelings of
Regret or
yeah, regret, right? Yeah.
so they would meet with a licensed psychiatrist, the psychologist, sorry. They assess their emotional stability and maturity. They evaluate the motivation for donating, which is, I think, the most important thing. And
Hmm.
then they screen for untreated mental health conditions.
Okay.
They'll ask you questions revolving around depression, anxiety, OCD, things like that.
Hmm.
And if you're medically treated for any of those things, it's not it's not good for you to donate. It's ASRM standard if you are on an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety, you don't fit the qualifications.
Hmm.
That stops a lot of women. I mean, we live in a world right now where everybody is on some sort of medication for their mental health. So I know it deters a lot of people, but at the end of the day, it is for your best interest. It's for the best interest of the soon-to-be child.
Yeah, and how do you explain that to candidates if they don't qualify? It's tough because such a big part of it becoming a donor or a surrogate includes the save the world gene. That you need to have a big heart, and so it's really difficult to feel like you're letting someone down or sharing bad news with them when they're excited about something. And so, how do you navigate um, letting someone know that they can't move forward?
It's really important for me to approach that with a lot of like TLC, time, love, and care.
Yeah.
Um, it's really important for me to go into the aspects of why they are disqualified. I try and go as into it as possible so they understand exactly where I'm coming from, where ASRM is coming from. I wouldn't ever look at somebody and just say, hey, you've been disqualified. Keep it moving.
Yeah.
I give them the general reasoning so that they understand. I allow for the individuals to feel their feelings. So, if they want to sit there and cry with me or just, feel that frustration, happy to hear that, happy to be that listening ear for them.
Hmm.
And then I also always suggest other ways to help somebody. If you could qualify for being a surrogate, I always push surrogacy. Other than that, volunteering, helping out at a local homeless shelter, just that, again, that save the world gene. I feel like the people that have that gene that don't quite have an outlet for it, it kind of eats at you. So it's very
Hmm.
important that they find that outlet. So I always try and give them, other roads to take.
Yes, I like that. And I think too, another part that goes into egg donation is the matching portion of it, where you don't know exactly what intended parents that are currently looking for a donor are looking for. And so that could be physical traits, that could be that they have a music background and they want their donor to have a music background. So, can you touch on a little bit of what you hear from kind of a matching standpoint for donors, so that I think it's encouraging for women um, to apply to become donors with all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of physical attributes, because you don't know who is looking for something like that.
Exactly. Yeah, so most intended parents, especially intended mothers that are searching for an egg donor, they want their egg donor to resemble them physically. So
Yeah.
that part's out of the way. I mean, somebody out there is looking for an egg donor that looks like you. I could guarantee it. There's so many different women and looks and, the whole nine. Apart from that, education is very important. So for our program, you have to at least have graduated high school. However, college is a very big thing for intended
Mm-hmm.
parents for. So any sort of degree, vocational degree, a certificate, something of that effect. It doesn't just have to be an associate's, a master's, doctorate degree. Um, Things like sporty. I played sports throughout my life, so that's a really big thing.
Yeah.
Somebody wants their kid to, be athletic, um,
Mm-hmm.
musically talented, things like that. If you are artsy, that's a really big thing because I don't like intended parents that are artsy. They want to raise artsy kids.
Yeah.
Things like things that you would never even think of. When I first started this, I never thought that somebody would be looking for a donor that could play flag football, but it happens, or a donor that knows how to paint or knows how to play piano.
Yeah.
So everybody has these like niche little things about them. That's the type of things that get you matched.
Mm-hmm. I love that it like celebrates uniqueness and your attributes, where you think maybe it's something that you don't like, oh, I don't like my nose, like, it's too big or something, and they're like, no, we actually like that, like that's in our family too, and we want that to blend in. And
That's the exact nose I've been looking for. I've heard
yeah.
that before.
So it's like empowering for even things that you don't think are special or unique about yourself. That's what I love about egg donation specifically, because it really does encourage women to own the qualities and the things that they bring to the table. So very cool. I love that. Okay, so we've kind of talked about the initial application process, where they're submitting an application, connecting with you, and you're asking a lot of questions: medical history, family history, and then they are then matched with intended parents before screening starts, or what are the next steps after they've applied, had the call with you? What's next?
Yep. So after you apply and have the call with me, I will send you basically a donor interest thing form that you would sign that says, "Hey, I'm not going to try and donate anywhere else while I'm
Okay.
with Giving Tree." It lasts for 6 months, so I always reach out to the donor about every 6 months and say, "Hey, you
Mhm.
still want to hang out with us, or you want to go somewhere else?" No hard feelings either way. Once they are matched, so typically I have intended parents reach out to me. The donor will go on our database. It'll have all of her photos, most of her information. It'll have, instead of her address, it'll just have her state location.
Mhm.
Instead of her name, it'll have a donor ID. No phone number, email address, nothing to be able to contact this person.
Yeah.
So we'll have a intended parent either start searching our database or come right to me and say, "Hey, I'm looking for blonde hair, blue eyes, between 5'6" and 5'9". So then I pull all of those. I then send it to the intended parents. They say, "Hey, I really want to know more about donor 1, 2, 3, 4." So I reach out to the donor and I ask her a couple more questions that might be, not something that we would have discussed on the interview. Things like, "Hey, do you happen to play piano?"
Mhm.
Little things like that.
Mhm.
Once everybody is in agreement, so it could go one of two ways. It could be an anonymous donation, which so the intended parents would only have the information that the donor provides on the profile, and the donor would only have the intended parent's location. It could be semi-anonymous, where they have more information, just not contact information, or it could be fully known, where they basically get each other's phone numbers. So kind of depends on those next steps. But once everybody's matched, we'll move into the screening process. The donor will then travel. Well, the donor first will do a genetic screening. So that is an at-home test that the clinic sends to them. They do a cheek swab, or sometimes it's a blood draw. Send it back off, and then that tests for anywhere between like a dozen to a couple hundred different genetic abnormalities.
Mm-hmm.
Very important, because we are, these intended parents are spending all this money to create this child. We don't want it to have any genetic abnormalities. We don't want to pass on any traits. So the clinic would then kind of compare her genetics with the intended father's or the sperm donors, whatever the situation may be, and make sure that they don't have any recessive genes that would pass on. Once that looks good, then we would send her off to the clinic for a one-day trip. Typically fly her there the day before, put her in a hotel. She'll have her medical screening the next day. Medical screening will consist of basically a full doctor's appointment. So height, weight, blood work. For the blood work, they do the AMH, which is basically your follicle count to see how many eggs you could produce. At the same time, most of the time we do the psych. So we'll do the psych at the clinic, which is where they talk about the motivation, everything that we talked about before. Those results typically take about 10 to 14 days. 10 to 14 days later, the clinic either says, yep, she's great, or no, hey, let's do one more thing. Fingers crossed, they say she's good to go, and we move on to those legal contracts. The donor gets her attorney to represent her in her best interest. The intended parents have a separate attorney. Intended parents will draft the contract. Most of the time for anonymous donations, I get this question a lot. Are the intended parents going to see my name in the contract? No. So the contract is between intended parents and donor, if it's an anonymous donation. And then the intended parents would then sign a separate signature sheet with their full names, and one signature sheet just saying IPs. Donor, same thing. Donor signature sheet, full name signature sheet. The signature sheets with the full names never get shared.
That's interesting. That's not really something that I had thought about with anonymous, but that's a great question, and that makes sense. And most of the time, the attorneys are communicating, like the donor's attorney and the intended parent's attorney are the ones directly communicating, and the parties are kind of left out of it at that point too.
Yep, 100%. So legal typically takes honestly about 2 to 3 weeks. It's much quicker than a surrogacy contract, just because there's not a lot to talk about. It's
pretty straightforward.
No legal rights, very straightforward. After that, we then start the medication cycle. Different for every clinic, just like surrogates are. But typically about 3 weeks of injections before you are then sent back to the clinic. And unlike surrogacy, where you just go to the clinic for 3 days for a transfer, you are sent to the clinic for anywhere from 7 to 10 days for your egg retrieval. So you'll do 1 or 2 local monitoring appointments. We'll find you a clinic close to your house, just to make sure that your levels are where they need to be. But once we get into the nitty gritty, making sure that you are producing follicles, that your AMH is still where it's supposed to be, your hormones are all looking good, the clinic wants to do all of that. So the clinic will see her almost every day, if not every other day, for about 7 to 10 days until trigger shot. And trigger shot happens anywhere between 48 hours to 24 hours before the actual retrieval. She'll have her trigger shot, go home, wake up for the retrieval morning. She has to be fasting, get there first thing in the morning. They'll do a light sedation, light anesthesia, I should say, do the retrieval. And then about 48 hours later, she'll travel home. Those first 48 hours are really important to make sure that we don't experience any side effects. OHSS is a very big one. It's ovary hyperstimulation, which could be very dangerous. So the clinic likes to monitor her for those 48 hours.
Okay.
Make sure everything looks good.
Okay. So the medications, are those pretty intense? Do they have a lot of side effects?
Yes and no. So side effects are different for everybody. The most important thing to note is that you are pumping yourself with hormones. Pumping a woman with hormones in any situation is going to make them feel crazy. It's going to make you have mood swings. You're going to be, nitpicking. You're gonna want to start arguments with your partner, the whole nine. Apart from that, I like to describe it as you're going to feel full. Like you are going to feel like you just ate Thanksgiving dinner for about 3 weeks straight. It's the strangest, most bizarre feeling in the whole world. Sometimes you'll have some pressure in your pelvic area. Maybe some light cramping, but the biggest thing that I always note and that donors always tell me is that they just feel so full that they literally can't eat anything. And it's
Hmm.
not that their stomach is full, it's that their ovaries are, you know,
Yeah. Like just the bloated feeling
yep.
of like there's just pressure. It doesn't necessarily hurt, but it's uncomfortable. Like you can tell that something is different
Yeah.
than
Some
norm.
nausea is very common. So like little things like that. But I like
Hmm.
to think that the injections are not terribly bad. Everybody
Hmm.
has different side effects, but all in all, I don't think they're awful.
Yeah. What would you say surprises donors the most about that process? Do you feel like they typically have something that they were surprised about?
I think the travel to the clinic where they have to go for those 7 to 10
Yeah.
days and
It's
basically
a long time.
right, and you're not feeling your best, so it's not like you wanna go travel whatever city you're in. You're
Yeah.
kinda laid up in a hotel room, just, Netflix and ordering DoorDash, things like that.
Hmm.
So I say that would surprise them the most. Everybody's always excited, like, "Oh, my clinic is in, Newport Beach, California. I'm gonna go to the beach," and they get
Right.
there and they're like, "I'm not leaving this hotel."
Right. Yeah. Not recommended.
No.
Are they allowed to bring someone with them on that trip?
Yep, absolutely. So it's actually required.
Okay.
Your support person has to be there at least one day before the retrieval, and then with you during the retrieval and for those 48 hours afterwards. But you always have the option of bringing your support person the whole time. It is paid
Mhm.
for in your whole benefits package essentially.
Yeah.
So I always recommend it. Nobody wants to be laid up in a hotel room without their friends or family for
Yeah.
7 to 10 days. So I always say kind of make it a trip. Pick a whole bunch of movies, order some
Mhm.
DoorDash, and have yourself a time.
Yeah. I would say that's where the flexibility is comes into play. That's really important because um, the trip can be off by a few days depending on, a lot of things and how your body is responding, and maybe they delay when you do the trigger shot. And so flexibility is important, and the ability to take off a week or even longer than a week, and especially to have another person there. So it's a lot of coordinating, and flexibility that's required for that.
Yeah, you definitely need to be flexible with your job, with your PTO. If you're in school, I
Yeah.
always recommend maybe don't take off the week from school because that'll set you behind quite a bit. But maybe see if you could do virtual classes or
Hmm.
talk to your teachers and let them know you're doing this incredible thing for somebody and see what could work for you.
Hmm. I know you kind of touched on retrieval day. Typically, you go in. That's a pretty quick procedure. Once you wake up, you're kind of assessed, and then you can go back to the hotel and pretty much spend your time relaxing there. It's not usually a full day at the clinic itself.
No, typically only a couple hours. I say most retrievals happen in the morning, so you probably have to arrive between 7 and 8 a.m.
Hmm.
You should be back in your hotel bed by noon.
And then aftercare, just relaxing. It's not really, there's nothing that they have to do specifically. It's just relaxing at the hotel.
Yeah. I like to call it, pampering bed rest. Put a face mask on,
Hmm.
get up, whatever you want to do.
Right.
But yeah, just no lifting. They're going to be so exhausted and just fatigued and probably nauseous that they're not going to want to do anything anyway.
Hmm.
So I just put your feet up, put a comfy set of pajamas on, and just don't move.
Yeah. What is something you wish every potential donor understood before starting?
The emotional impact of it, and
Hmm.
your reason why. We ask surrogates all the time what their why is. I think it's very important that we ask donors the same thing because if a donor
Hmm.
were to come to me and say, "Hey, I'm in X amount of money in debt right now, and I really need this compensation," I would tell them to take a walk because you're not. If your heart's not in it, you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Hmm.
If you regret it one day because you only did it for the money, that's going to look bad on me.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's not enough money to spend a lifetime
Exactly.
of feeling regret so that you were able to pay off a credit card or take a trip or
Right.
something. That
Yeah.
it's
It's
just not
silly.
worth the long-term effects of that. And speaking of the emotional side, how would you say donors typically feel after the retrieval? Do they have that feeling of accomplishment, or they're just still kind of waiting to maybe hear the results of the retrieval?
I think
Where
it's more accomplishment. Of course, there's always that like, oh my God, did I do good enough? Everybody, we all have that feeling on our day to day life. But I think it's more so just, oh, I did that. Like I did this for somebody else. And pride is a really big thing. Of course, some people struggle emotionally afterwards. Whether it's, oh, I'm sad that this process is over, or like I'm sad that like I don't really know what's going to happen from
yeah.
here on out. While uncommon, that's kind of where my role comes in. I talk to my donors all the time. So, you could be 2 months post retrieval and you're still going to hear from me. Hey, bestie, how you feeling? What are you doing? Something like that. So I want to make sure that they never feel alone in our program. That's my biggest thing.
I love that. Yeah. How do you talk to them about the future biological connection to a child, like long term? How do you talk to them about that?
So I always kind of share my own personal experience. I think that's very important for somebody to know that, hey, I'm not selling you on this because I'm going to make any money off of it. I'm selling you on this because I truly believe that this is one of the greatest things in the world. And I'm spitting image of why. Like I absolutely loved my time being an egg donor. Not to get into that quite yet, but
Yeah.
yeah, I always share firsthand account of, what I was feeling after that donation and, what I feel now, X amount of years later. And I always offer room for like, oh, this is what I fear. I think that's really important that we encounter those fears right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid of this. Okay, let's tackle what you're afraid of right now. So
Yes.
I think that's very important. Open
Yeah.
communication, I think, is just the best way to go.
It really is. And that has been kind of a theme in other episodes too, that um, we're here to make sure that people are asking questions and just getting it out, because having fears or doubts or questions in your mind and you think, oh, that's embarrassing to ask, or that makes me feel dumb, is just not it. That's like we're here
That's
to
not
answer
what we're
all
here
the
for.
questions, and we've been there before with personal experience with lots of different employees, and
Yeah,
so
I always refer to my donors like when I'm chatting with them, besties. I feel like it opens up that, oh, I could ask a dumb and what I think is a dumb
so
and stupid
cute.
question. I'm be like, girl, what are you worried
Please.
about asking me that for? We're friends.
Yeah.
But as far as like the biological offspring, I always like emphasize how much that child has been prayed for and yearned for, and how loved they are already. They are just a clump of cells right now. But
Hmm.
to the intended parents, that is everything. It is everything they have ever wished for. It's everything they've been trying for X amount of years.
Yeah.
Um, and that emotional side is really, it really drives it home.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that is an important part of the donation, that we talked about the financial motivation or incentive behind a donation. And that is an important part. It's, people aren't typically doing this for free. They're not becoming surrogates for free or donors for free. And so there is definitely a financial incentive behind it, but just balancing the emotional connection to it and the reward with that, so that it's not the sole focus, or I think it's going to be a pretty disappointing process.
Yeah. I always say that the compensation is going to be the least, what, God, I lost my word.
It's the
The
least
least rewarding
rewarding. Yeah.
portion, the least rewarding portion of this process is going to be the financial compensation.
Hmm. Yeah. Are there any red flags that you think come up when women are looking at different agencies, or clinics to work with? Anything that they should look out for?
Yeah, I think lack of transparency is a really big thing,
Mm-hmm.
either with clinics, with agencies, with donation banks, whatever it is that you're looking for. If they're like, oh, you could sign up and donate tomorrow, that's not how any of this works. That's not transparency. They're not talking about the long term effects. They're not talking about the medications. Overemphasis on financial compensation is a really big one. Again, least rewarding part of the whole process is financial compensation. Yes, of course, donors need to be compensated for their time and everything that they're doing. But
Hmm.
at the end of the day, that's not the only reason. And we've said this probably 15 times today. It needs to be more than that. And then probably the lack of screening before the donation. You need to have those genetics. You need to have your AMH tested. They can't just look at you and say, oh, yeah, you're going to be a great donor. Let's get in the retrieval room. Not saying that any of that happens, but
Yeah.
those would be red flags.
Yeah. That's good to know. Um, who would you encourage to explore egg donation?
Anyone that has to save the world, Gene.
Yes.
And you will know that you have it by understanding what I just said. And
Hmm.
if anybody is thinking about it, they don't even have to apply. My email is on our database. Feel free to reach out, and if you want to just talk about it or hear more about it or whatever it may be, I always encourage to research on your own because, again, I could tell you I think it's the greatest thing under the sun, and you might not agree. So research on your own. YouTube, TikTok is a really big one.
Hmm.
Donors get on there all the time talking about their own experiences. We live in an age of social media, so I would say use it to your advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. I love hearing personal stories of different experiences, and even to listen to experiences of intended parents that, or now parents that have used a donor to become parents, to hear them talk about their side of being on the receiving end. I think is really impactful too, and kind of helps motivate women to be a part of that, and you know help that happen for someone else.
Yeah, it is. It's the greatest thing in the whole world. It is a gift that I could only imagine how great it feels to be a parent after wanting it for so long.
Hmm. What advice would you give someone considering egg donation?
Do your own research. Reach out to us, reach out to somebody on TikTok. Just get a good feel of what this means and what the process looks like before you apply. I think that helps everybody in the situation. You'll come in knowing exactly the right questions to ask, instead of just, oh, I think you answered all my questions, even though I only went through the very beginning.
Hmm.
It's very important that you ask your own questions and you figure out why you want to do this.
Yeah. Any other thoughts of what makes this work really meaningful to you personally,
Yeah,
just
I mean,
based on your background and everything else?
I'm an experienced egg donor, so that in itself is super meaningful to me. This is the greatest job in the whole world that I just happen to have fallen into.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for that. But everything about this job is meaningful. From the intended parents getting their happy endings to the donors that are making that happen, the surrogates involved, our team, everything is so meaningful and just the greatest job in the whole world.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle, and getting to see all of the pieces kind of connect together is a really fascinating part of being in this industry, and all of the parts that go into it, starting with donors and then the surrogates and the IVF clinics and the attorneys and the social workers or psychologists, the case managers. It's just really cool to see such a good network of people that really care.
So many
Be
moving parts, and we all move seamlessly together.
Yeah,
It's really impressive.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining, and stay tuned because our next episode we will be reconnecting with Elena to talk about her personal experience as an egg donor. So I'm really excited to hear more about your experience as a donor, and we will see you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might find it just as thought-provoking.